Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you to Daniel for having me. It's really exciting to be able to speak to you all. Um, and as you might have mentioned, I'm kind of sick right now, so I'm sorry if I sound kind of annoying or crazy. But I am here to present what I've written. So the title is The K-pop Metanarrative and Citizens of Idolatry. And yeah, I'm gonna start off with like talking about myself for a little bit, if you can bear it, because this is somewhat personal. um, so what happened to me? Um, I used to be a really serious person, and people always told me that I was an old soul and that I was mature for my age. I always dreamt of being an art critic or a curator. I wore all types of like shapeless, neutral clothes from COS. I wore these like Prada glasses, even though I didn't really need them. I was really into Issey Miyake. I was wearing turtlenecks all the time. I went to art fairs and galleries in Chelsea, and I wore like weird chunky platforms. I cared a lot about ambient music and like Aphex Twin, and I really wanted to be like a gallery girl. I read a lot more. I didn't really wear makeup. And then something really strange happened around my second year in New York. Um, I got kind of tired of art. It became really serious, especially the fact that like so many artists were responding to the threat of fascism in America and climate change. This is pretty superficial, but I just thought, what happened to all the glamour that I was like attracted to in the first place? All of the artists that I once respected in my youth were now making these like Banksy level statements about Trump and Brexit and using the internet in a really cringe-inducing way that reminded me of my grandparents. And none of it really seemed as profound or sublime as it once did. Um, Everything that I was reading kind of seemed like bullshit. The ambient music that I was listening to became so obscure that it was just like droning sounds. And eventually I stopped listening to music altogether. Everything I prided myself on, all of my intellectual pursuits and all of my superficial attempts to seem mature suddenly seemed really pointless and uncool. But what happened next completely reoriented my life priorities and my aesthetic sensibilities, my geopolitical perspective, my cultural values. I became really obsessed with Korean pop music. And what you're seeing here is kind of what my life has become. It's like sentimentalism, romance, complicated fruit tea drinks, cute animals, skincare, beauty, kitsch, pastries, school uniforms. Um, this is just kind of like a mood board, surface level of the aesthetic, but I guess what I'm going to talk about is how millions of people are going through the same process. And there are two parts to this. What I'm calling the meta narrative, which draws us in, and then the idolatry citizen, which is who we become. Okay. So how does this all go down? Before I'd ever interacted with the music, which is surprisingly really tertiary to this whole transformation, I'd been witnessing the online behavior of K-pop fans for months. On Twitter, fans of this group Luna had been spamming the word Stan Luna under viral tweets of all kinds. Breaking news, articles, one-off jokes, celebrity gossip, irrelevant personal updates from unassuming strangers. You would just see this slogan everywhere. It was inescapable and said with such irreverence that it became just like the background noise of the internet. I couldn't really go anywhere without seeing it. Fans of this same group also had a talent for making fake breaking news posts about their members, claiming that they were lesbian billionaires that became the richest couple alive, or esports stars that won millions of dollars in prizes. They also claimed that one of the members was the godmother of Elon Musk's child with Grimes, which spiraled out of control to the point where Grimes actually confirmed it in an Instagram comment. I was really mystified by these people who seemed to have mastered the algorithm and moved really swiftly with it, taking advantage of the general public's lack of media literacy. Why were they so compelled to spread the gospel of this group, and why did their promotion strategy make absolutely no reference to the group as musicians, kind of just like using images of them and lies to increase their profile? So I started researching this group and I was immediately really hypnotized by them. There were 12 girls between ages 16 and 22. Their Korean name translates directly to Girls of the Month. They were pitched as this secretive project, with each member releasing an album every month before they combined forces on their year anniversary. It all seemed really conceptual and cinematic, and each girl was shrouded with a lot of intrigue and had a really clearly defined aesthetic, which made it all the more powerful when they finally became whole and became like all the same. Nearly all of them had stage names. They didn't have social media. Each one of them had like a representative color slash animal slash music genre, so that by the time the group formed, they already had this like full diverse catalog of music, and it was kind of like a masterclass in world building. Central to their project was this concept of the Luniverse, which was just like this totally made up like lore system that fans mostly created. And it was this overarching fictional storyline that tied all of the girls together. It was constantly alluded to in their music videos and teasers. It was somehow all connected to the Mobius strip, alternate timelines, color theory, astrology, genetics, biblical theory, Jungian archetypes, physics, etc. Fans would ask the girls to confirm or deny their cracked out theories, but it seemed like the girls had no idea what they were talking about because none of it was actually real. It seemed like their creative directors were consciously just like dropping these crumbs all throughout their content and leading it to nowhere, creating a semiosphere of lore that really had no concrete meaning or connection to reality, in hopes of enabling this type of like Marvel Cinematic Universe media consumption that essentially turned fans into schizophrenics, scrambling for meaning at every lyric and every split-second frame, zooming into the backgrounds of everything and reading things backwards and upside down. But wait, back to reality, and like bear with me on this point. The year that I got into all of this stuff was 2019, and so the election season was in full swing in America. This was like the first election that I could vote in, and I was really bummed because like regardless of politics, definitely like one of these guys is better than the other. But it became really clear that my two choices in the first election where I was eligible to vote were just these like really old men who were visibly demented and geriatric. And Biden is now like the oldest president in American history, and what many refer to as the gerontocracy has basically stripped so many young people of any hope for the future. And the opposite of an old man is a young woman. So I think that's what really allowed me to form these parasocial connections to these girls, these K-pop girls, is because they represented hope for the future, like an alternate reality populated entirely by young women who sang and danced in perfect synchronicity, not even competing with each other, but part of the same entity. I think it was their synergy that excited me the most. I kind of thought this was a result of the fact that I never participated in team sports in my youth. One kind of had to assume that they were also friends. They lived together, ate together, practiced together. They moved in perfect synchronization in hypnotizing formations, which I could watch for hours on end. But what did these formations and like synchronicities really mean in themselves? It turns out someone already figured this out in the previous century. In the early 1960s, cultural theorist Siegfried Krakauer published this book, The Mass Ornament. He was associated with the legendary Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, and like a lot of great thinkers, he fled Germany during the rise of the Nazis, eventually settling in America, where he became obsessed with the cultural products of capitalist society, namely this really popular dance troupe called the Tiller Girls, who are like pictured here in the middle. And this like dance troupe that was just a bunch of girls like moving at the same time went on to inspire the grandiose dance scenes that you see in many Hollywood musical numbers from the 30s and 40s. To him, this group of synchronized dancing women, which he called the mass ornament, was a metaphor for modernity and like capitalism, an end in itself. So this is a quote from him. "These products of distraction factories are no longer individual girls, but indissoluble girl clusters whose movements are demonstrations of mathematics. In the dancer's geometrically regulated and synchronized patterns of movement, he discovers the possibility of an aesthetic relation to organized toil. The legs of the tiller girls correspond to the hands in the factory," he wrote. "They're the aesthetic reflex of the rationality aspired to by the prevailing economic system." This is kind of like paraphrasing hard, but it's both the ornamentalization of function and the functionalization of ornament. German critical theorist Theodor Adorno, who I was like reading a lot at the time, seemed to also kind of predict the K-pop mechanism. He was similarly obsessed with the culture industry and wrote a lot about music. He was also coming out of Nazi Germany, where he'd seen the effects of national and youth music movements, their cult of social bonding and collectivity as such, and the integration of the individual into busy community activities. When I read about that, I was just like, oh, this is kind of like exactly what I'm doing. Like this form of music has somehow taken over my everyday life just because they're constantly giving me something to keep up with. Yeah, so he was really like conscious of the use of music as a cohesive social force, something capable of creating the illusion of community within a reified and alienated society. So the more that I read about his understanding of music, the more I realized that the K-pop system that I knew today was nearly exactly his definition of music under fascism. Yikes. So it kind of seems like a lot of critical theorists saw all of this coming and didn't really have anything good to say, just mostly warning about populism and alienation. In another text, Culture Industry Reconsidered, Adorno wrote that the more dehumanized its methods of operation and content, the more diligently and successfully the culture industry propagates supposedly great personalities and operates with heartthrobs. Earlier this year, these dehumanizing methods came to light when all 12 members of this girl group Luna publicly sued their company to end their exclusive contracts. With this action came a flood of information about the reality of their mistreatment. So while fans were arguing over the role of the visible light spectrum in their music videos, these real girls who everyone suddenly realized were real workers employed under a company were being starved, overworked, mismanaged, heavily censored. They basically had no freedom and also no money because it came out that their company had been withholding pay since their debut. So something really interesting happened. Rather than the company promoted meta-narrative of the astrological events and music videos and alternate timelines, fans became engrossed in the real meta-narrative, which was a gripping legal and financial drama with evidence scattered throughout a massive archive of media. Behind the scenes of music videos, vlogs, offhand tweets, every communication over the past 4 years became a coded cry for help. Instead of music videos, fans were diving into legal injunctions filed with the Seoul District Court. Luna's parent company's financial situation became a point of major scrutiny. It seemed like no one had actually been paid by them, and stylists and choreographers and makeup artists were all coming forward saying that they also had the same issue. Earlier that year, two larger K-pop companies, Hybe and SM, were embroiled in a similar drama during a very public hostile takeover attempt and accusations of insider trading. These real-world conspiracies were quickly becoming more and more appealing to fans who convinced themselves that they were acting as investigative vigilantes on their idol's behalf. So I watched in real time as the collaborative energy that once went into these like crackpot fan theories was now being redirected to the legal system and like financial drama. It also seemed to me to correspond to a shift in the general media landscape. People were less interested in escapism, fantasy, and science fiction, and more interested in true crime, procedural drama, and legal thrillers. Something that I think about a lot is this like 18th century aesthetic philosopher Edmund Burke wrote that perfection is not the cause of beauty, and that beauty in distress is the most affecting beauty. The constant distress that surrounds idols, often inflicted or perpetuated by their own management, only serves to make them more lovable. These incidences of abuse were going viral on their own, stirring up support from other fandoms and I guess anyone who cares about workers' rights. So these are just like random collections of their like evidence of abuse. They were just like always bruised. This one girl passed out on stage. The same girl was posting about how she wasn't eating and weighed like basically nothing. Yeah, it was just really sad. All of this reminded me of an instance in 2016 in which this K-pop girl group member from the group Twice, Cho Tzu, appeared on a variety show and introduced herself as Taiwanese and held up like a Taiwanese flag. Her group Twice was subsequently banned from Chinese television. She lost a major endorsement with Huawei, the Chinese electronics company, and she was forced to make this tearful apology video where she admitted that there was only one China. And it drew comparisons to like a terrorist hostage video because it was just so different from the form in which people were used to seeing her as this like sunny idol. And she was like very obviously reading off of this script and seemed really distressed. Her apology video was posted on election day in Taiwan, and it caused a major turnout of young voters who felt that her treatment was unfair. One candidate, Tsai Ing-wen, made a statement on election day in support of Tzu, and a survey revealed that her apology video affected the decision of nearly 1.4 million voters. Tsai Ing-wen ended up winning the election and becoming the first democratically elected female president of Taiwan. For me, this is when I first saw the political potential of cuteness and distress. The fact that it could actually swing like a major election and that everyone seemed to rally together behind this girl who had so little agency. Something about it also reminded me of Greta Thunberg, who became the face of climate activism at age 15. But I've also like always been really obsessed with her. I feel like she was pretty smart in that she like weaponized her cuteness, and her like visible distress kind of caused her to become an emotional terrorist that really affected older people and people in power. But also like it's hard to say if she was really effective. I think she just ended up being more distressed and like giving up publicly. Sian Naga is this like really amazing writer who wrote this essay called Cuteness in the Avant-Garde, and she wrote, "For all its pathos of powerlessness, the cute commodity is thus capable of making surprisingly powerful demands." While idols are always professing their love and gratitude for their fans, it's really their emotional, voyeuristic like status that does the trick. I think when they break the fourth wall and show their struggle and sacrifice, is when people become aware of the fact that they're also just young people with really shitty exploitative jobs. One of my friends, Tiger Dingsun, is also like a K-pop stan and a really good writer. And he wrote something about his favorite group 17 and how they have these like YouTube shows that he's always watching that really like forced him to become a huge fan. And he said, "Despite all the heavily produced aspects of their lives, sometimes the cracks begin to show, and there are suddenly moments where I'm confronted with the reality that these people are overworked and hypermanaged. It must be hard to live a life where every hour is spent being the symbolic figurehead for a project that's essentially an interface for brand integrations. And for what in exchange? Fame? What use is fame? In those moments, I can't help but see K-pop idols, all as wounded pigeons forced to be doves, and I can't help but stare in morbid curiosity. How could I look away? Despite the artifice, there's real love that I have for my idols." Wait. There we go. So this is where I'm like deriving this concept of the term idol citizen. I feel like we're on the precipice of essentially a new political party being formed where all constituents are like one issue voters on the subject of idols' rights. I mean, it's kind of insane that presumably some of the highest earning performers in Korea are also the most low agency and have the least freedom, with millions of regular people speaking up and protesting on their behalf, convinced that they're always victims. And these people are adopting the strategies of labor unions and civil rights movements to advocate for these idols completely anonymously and for nothing in return, and honestly with pretty low effectiveness. It's kind of strange because it's like pretty pro-capitalism but anti-corporate, and everyone is like on the same page that the corporations and the companies are bad, but there's no way to access idols and idol content without those companies. I also think this is going to have like pretty intense geopolitical consequences. In 2016, China implemented unofficial bans on Hallyu, which is like the Korean wave of pop culture, following Seoul's decision to install a US-led anti-missile system in Korea. There was kind of like an unofficial order directed to Chinese companies to stay away from Hallyu contents or working with artists from Korea. Korean artists weren't allowed to do concerts in China. The Chinese government also delayed for years issuing licenses to Korean businesses, including cosmetics and gaming companies, to export their products to China. So this kind of led like Chinese K-pop fans to see themselves almost as like a protected group that was like being discriminated against. K-pop fan clubs were banned from posting on Weibo, and Chinese idols promoting in Korea found themselves navigating a diplomatic minefield. And this definitely changed the way that a lot of young people were interacting with their governments, because I think they saw their idols as like trapped in between this the system. And on the left is this instance in which the Korean girl group Red Velvet performed in North Korea, and there were a lot of conspiracies about how Kim Jong-un just like had a crush on this one member, Irene, and like forced her to be next to her in all of these photos. So on one hand, it was like kind of a important diplomatic move for like North and South Korea to show that they could like share this cultural export, but on the other hand, everyone was just like, this seems like really just motivated by Kim Jong-un like secretly being a K-pop fan. So kind of like the TLDR of it is that I think that politicians are going to get cuter, or at least harness the power of cuteness for their own gain, because these forces are getting really strong. And I think that we're also just going to see like a global voting bloc of K-pop fans, and we've already seen how that's like affected commerce. There are so many K-pop idols that have become like luxury brand ambassadors that are just like having massive impacts on the purchasing attitudes of like young people. But I feel like this is gonna like become a major issue. And I think that's it. Thank you. Okay, should I stop sharing?
Okay. Thanks so much for that. It was super amazing. And I also like, thanks so much. I know that you're probably like really suffering inside, but
No, it's okay. No, I feel bad.
Every now and again when you were like sniffling, I thought like you were actually crying. It was like this kind of cute.
That would be good. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess like, does anyone have any questions? I'm sure there was kind of so much that was kind of you covered there or you went through. So yeah, does anyone have any initial questions? I'm looking at you, Jen. Sorry. Can you hear, Alex?
Not really, but I just have kind of bad hearing anyway.
Yeah, I'll repeat.
I haven't thought of anything yet, but I was just thinking of the last comment about the kind of influence of these K-pop stars, and there was also, I had someone from Blackpink as performing at Crazy Horse in France, which is quite interesting because it's like unlike it's a very different approach, kind of like exposure, and there were a lot of but I think it's super specific.
Super specific about Blackpink. Okay, yeah. So Jen asked about I guess again. No, but I guess like Jen asked about, I guess, like Blackpink or a member of Blackpink performing at Crazy Horse in Paris.
Oh, really? That's really funny. Wait, was it Jenny?
Okay, it was Lisa.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
I actually do know. It's just I mean, I guess like one of the questions I had was I mean, there's a couple of things. Like, one of the things was super interesting when you were talking about, I guess that sort of transition to the recognition of the stars being workers, and that sort of, and not simply being like these godlike figures. But I guess like earlier in the session this morning, we had a studio called Cream Projects who were talking about, I guess like digital kind of work, or I guess like work within the platform stack, and kind of like, I guess how our bodies are forced to work within the kind of platform stack, and in what ways. So I guess it was just kind of interesting in terms of that shift in terms of recognizing these I guess like idols as being workers. I mean, I think I kind of quoted, or at least I think I quoted you correctly, where you were saying like this recognition that these stars are sort of have shitty exploited jobs, and it just seemed like there's something very similar to, I mean, that's a real sort of connection to a lot of people right now who are in similar, in the sense of are also in really shitty exploitative jobs. So I guess like, I'm not really sure where I'm going with this question, but I guess like where do you think that's kind of gonna go with K-pop stars? Like, do you think there will be a point where that recognition will like just be embedded into our understanding of K-pop, or do you think it will like result in some kind of like political movement or activism or something?
Yeah, well, I could see like companies kind of harnessing this energy and like getting idols to just start being more vulnerable about it, and just being like, look at how hard I'm working for you, like please stream my album type of thing. I feel like we're already seeing stuff like that happen in the West, where like musicians are being really honest on social media, but also kind of desperate in a way that's off-putting, just being like, oh, my label is like forcing me to make TikToks, or even things where like Taylor Swift is really public about like trying to own her masters, and like kind of pulling back the curtain on like music publication and rights issues. So I guess I could see something like that happening. The other thing that I think is interesting is that like the like shitty working conditions of idols somehow inspires fans to become workers themselves. This was like one of the craziest things to me when I first became like a K-pop fan, is the fact that like it was operating so much like a business. Like fans were doing essentially like free PR work and free kind of just like social media work and free graphic design, doing like re-edits of music videos to make them better. So I don't know, I feel like maybe fans are going to become more aware of the work that they're putting in, and maybe seizing that a little bit,
I guess
if
like
they're not seeing the conditions they want.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like with that, what do you think the possible sort of result of that would be? I mean, like, would it be a sort of like a rebellion, a fan rebellion, or like or I guess like, or also like how do you see the K-pop groups themselves like responding to that possible sort of consciousness, I guess?
I don't know, it's really hard to say. Like with this lawsuit with Luna, the fans like assembled this union and started voting on like what they thought appropriate ways to like support the group through this time was, and everyone kind of like decided like, oh, like unfollowing them on Instagram would be too harsh, like that would actually just make them feel bad, but like not listening to their music would be fine. And then just like coming up with all of these ways to like listen to their music without giving money directly to the company. essentially just like doing piracy. I guess it's like one way you can get around it. And then also these like protest trucks. But I feel like those aren't very like efficient. Yeah, outside of like entertainment industries in Korea, there are like always these trucks parked up that have like messages of that fans pay for on these LED screens that'll say like you're treating so and so unfairly and like these are our demands. But I feel like the companies aren't really like responding to that. I honestly feel like we're probably going to see some type of form of like terrorism happening or like hacking or something crazy.
Yeah, because I guess like there's something potentially interesting in like that, how when you were describing it there, like that sort of distinction between the care for the members of the group and the kind of disdain or distrust or whatever to the corporation. I think there's like something like really interesting in that sort of possible potential sort of like tension there, that like how it kind of plays out, like how that gets resolved from a sort of corporate management perspective is kind of it'll be interesting to see how that sort of plays out, right?
Yeah.
I guess does anyone, and now that I've asked a few questions, hopefully that's like I don't know, whatever. Does anyone have any questions? Otherwise you'll just like hear me saying stuff. It's not not the best. Maybe okay, the other thing I was thinking about, which was the kind of, I guess like the, when you gave that description at the beginning around the kind of law strategies or kind of tactics, I was good because it's, you know, it seemed like so complex in a certain way, you know, like yeah, all these kind of yeah, particular kind of ways to create these incredibly rich worlds. I guess in light of what you said later on about this potential tension with the corporations, etc., etc., like, do you think that how do you think that that's going to be sort of woven into a kind of law like strategy or tactic, or do you think we are fastly approaching like a post-law period?
Yeah, I think that my main theory is that just like we're going to replace all of the fake lore which is like sold to us by the company with like real lore, which is more just like real world conspiracy theories. I think it's like really hard for people to detach themselves from this type of behavior where they're like investigating and trying to put things together. That just seems to be like the main use of the internet for a lot of people. But yeah, that form of like kind of spiraling down the rabbit hole and like trying to assemble more information, I think is going to be redirected more to like real people in a way that can be bad. Like it can be kind of like stalkerish probably. But yeah, I'm just seeing like generally a lack of interest in the actual content. Like the music isn't really that important to anyone anymore, and just more of that attention being focused to like the system as a whole. And even people who are like not invested in K-pop are like interested in the inner workings of the system as just like a global powerhouse of commerce, and it's just like so multimedia.
Yeah, I was wondering, I know when I first contacted you, like one of the things I was really interested in when you were talking, when you did the episode on K-pop, was this, when you were talking about the kind of expanded universe, the K-pop expanded universe, and like what struck me was how potentially similar it was to like fashion brands, especially kind of like the like global fashion brands. And sort of in my head I was like making this comparison between the music of K-pop groups and like the clothes of a particular brand, and I was just wondering like what you just said about the sort of kind of reduction of interest potentially in the music itself. Do you see a sort of connection with like global fashion brands, or in the sense of sort of like if you equate global fashion brands as being like, you know, the equivalent to music is their collections or their products that they kind of sell in stores, etc. Like, do you see a sort of connection there, or for you is it operating under different logics?
No, yeah, I can definitely see how it's similar. I feel like there's been more of an emphasis on like designers as personalities in the past few years, and you know, the corporate drama of brands and luxury houses. So I feel like that's a similarity for sure. I think like, yeah, personality seems to be like such a major commodity and such a major force that really can't be replicated. And I think, yeah, personality is what like makes idols really lovable. It's what makes you attached to like a designer's brand philosophy. So yeah, like everything is becoming kind of about like gossip and interpersonal drama, but it's also becoming about like commerce in a really interesting way. I think, yeah, people are just getting less interested in like fantasy and more in just like the juiciness of real life stuff and money.
Yeah. Jen, you come click so that I didn't have to repeat it.
My question is on
Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Probably something quite old school, but I was thinking of like Japanese pop girl pop groups like AKB48, which was like an academy where girls could enter and then graduate from. And so it was like I don't know, it was like hundreds of girls go in and out of a band. I was wondering if in K-pop you see like things structurally changing for these groups, and is there, so like for example for Luna, what's the exit node for them for
Yeah. Wait, I'm so excited you asked about that because I wrote this like really long thing about AKB48 when I was in college. I was like really obsessed with them and how they were like this political organization that held elections and like had their own internal rankings and factions, and yeah, voting was like a really important part of their structure. Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard because K-pop's been around for like a while, but there are so few examples of like people who have exited kind of successfully, especially from like a major group. Like there are people who have gone solo, but they don't really have like the same level of fame. I think the main thing that happens is like people just disappear from public life totally. Like we've seen this with a number of boy groups where like randomly one member will just come out and be like, hey guys, by the way, like I have a girlfriend, actually she's my wife and she's pregnant and we have a kid. And like, yeah, I'm gonna like stop doing this. So I think it's just like the inaccessibility of their private lives makes it hard to understand things until they've like already happened. But yeah, there are also a lot of these like survival shows in Korea that I find really fascinating that have become like these somewhat political battlegrounds where they'll have like 100 girls and there'll be like 33 from Korea, 33 from Japan, 33 from China, and it just becomes this like elective drama where, you know, everyone becomes suspicious of like other countries buying votes, or everyone kind of becomes like critical of a certain country's like work ethic or like talent. So yeah, I'm really interested in those like really massive displays of idol searching. I think there's just like such a surplus of talented and beautiful young women like in the world in general. Like it's not something that I think we are ever going to run out of supply for. But I think, yeah, the demand and like the awareness of exploitation is going to change.
Great. Any final questions by anyone? No? Okay. So thanks very much, Alexi. It was like so good.
Really?
And like, I mean, I took so many like screenshots or whatever. So, and I think like a number of people, you know, if taking like shots of whatever, the screen is a marker of how good the talk was. You like whatever did well. So so thanks.
Okay.
and get well soon. I hope that you feel better.
All right, thank you.
We'll speak to you soon.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Thanks a lot.